Hello, you're listening to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph. Today, we're going to be talking about transforming toxic culture, maybe on your unit, in your department, in a small work group around you, one conversation at a time, continuing the theme of how individual conversations can transform culture. I'd like you to imagine a setting: a physician and a nurse working together on the ICU have a patient who has end stage renal disease, has sepsis, he's not a transplant candidate, and he's had congestive heart failure, cardiomyopathy, and he's really not been doing well on the unit. A nurse in this context is with the patient frequently 10 and 12 hours a day over the last few days. And imagine an attending or a doctor or consultant who's had a long-term relationship with this family and the patient and has certain goals of care that they're still hoping to accomplish. Here's what their conversation as they try to solve a problem for this patient might sound like.
Oh, hey, Alyssa. I want to start setting up for the HD line so we can start CRRT.
Here we go again.
What was that?
Nothing. That's just really the plan for this patient.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take a lot of fluid off. Nephrology's on board. Yeah, that's the plan. We need to do it fast.
All right. I just feel like a goals of care meeting would be more beneficial. It's futile.
You know what? We promised we would do everything, and for now, we have this plan.
All right. Another poor patient. You guys aren't the ones in the room for 12 hours watching him suffer.
What if building leadership and connection skills in real life was less about grand epiphanies and more about small, consistent reps? The way athletes train, the way musicians practice, the way simulation refines teaming and clinical performance. Push ups, sit ups, building up your cardio. We put challenges and weights in front of ourselves to get fit. We embrace no pain, no gain. Yet when we find something difficult in real life, especially an interpersonal something, we often skitter away. We put down the weight and walk away from the workout. Curious Now helps us lean into those everyday interactions, the awkward silences, simmering tensions, and high stakes conversations, and treat them like reps in a leadership gym. Curious Now, stronger later.
So, this conversation actually comes from a real project that I and my colleague, Dr. Laura Rock, a pulmonologist and critical care doc, and I have been doing in different forms over the last 4 years. And that project has been: how do we transform unit culture via point of care conversations, usually across professional differences, such as doctor and nurse, nurse and respiratory therapist, communicating across different points of view, different professional training, different genders, different races, at point of care, under time pressure, and occasionally in the face of a deteriorating patient, puts extraordinary pressures on the two people conversing with each other. And one of the things that Laura Rock and I discovered the hard way when we started to do this work is you can teach people conversational skills, you can teach people coordination skills, you can teach people negotiation skills, you can teach people how to collaborate quickly at point of care. But if they don't care about the other person, if they don't believe that their thoughts, their diagnoses, their goals might actually not be perfectly right, if they're not able to think, hey, my thoughts might be better if I opened them up to scrutiny by other people and we collaborated to find a better way forward. So if people can't hold their own thoughts and feelings lightly, and more importantly, if they don't genuinely care or see a benefit to understanding where the other person is coming from, all the communication coaching in the world ain't gonna work. So, what Laura and I have been doing over the last 4 years is trying to figure out how to quickly help people get to a place where they understand that they have certain thoughts and beliefs, and those are not necessarily always God's truth. The other person has thoughts and beliefs and things that they're up against, and it's valuable to know those. And if we can care about each other, those conversations can go better. What that involves is the things that we've been doing on this podcast for the last 14 weeks together, which is people recognizing I have judgments. Oh, there are standards behind those judgments. Oh, other people have standards too. Fact that I'm assuming that person is an idiot, I'm naturally wired to do that. Okay, hang on, let me slow down. Let me see if I can flip that using something like WTF to WTF to hold a generous inference about them. Hey, they didn't wake up this morning wanting to kill patients. They woke up this morning wanting to help patients. Hey, they didn't wake up this morning wanting to ruin my day. No, they woke up this morning trying to figure out how to have an efficient day where they can get through their tasks as well. So, the skill that we're going to talk about today, which is actually what do we say to each other at point of care, only works when we continually do the reps and workouts of the week that we've been practicing together over the last few weeks of recognizing my judgments, getting curious, getting temporarily, if only temporarily, generous in my inferences about the other person. So, all that internal reset is part of what needs to happen to do what we're going to talk about today. I'm making the argument that all these reps and workouts of the week pour into this moment of how do I speak to my colleague at point of care. And so that is our readiness goal for today. So, our readiness goal for today is be ready to share a point of view that's important to you and follow immediately with a genuine invitation to find out their point of view or their take. Let's talk a little bit about where this approach to point of care negotiation, point of care collaboration comes from. And for those of us who don't work clinically, let me talk about what point of care for us would be. So I'm in a crucial moment of a meeting where I think we should zig and the other person thinks we should zag. How am I going to share why I think we should zig? And how am I going to find out why they think we should zag? And how am I going to collaborate with them? Or similarly, if I'm setting up a project that's going to go on for many months, and one person wants to use the X technique and process to run the project, and someone else wants to use the Y technique and process to run the project. Any place where we have apparently diverging goals or apparently diverging ways we want to do things is where we can use these essentially conflict resolution, conflict management, collaboration enhancing approach. Chris Argyris was a professor at Harvard Business School, and his student, Bill Torbert, was a professor at Boston College, and I was a student of Bill Torbert's. And Donald Schoen was a professor at MIT. Chris Argyris, Bill Torbert, and Don Schoen all studied how professionals get stuck in conversations that tend to escalate error, tend to obfuscate and hide what people are thinking, what I alluded to in a previous episode as the mystery mastery approach, and how people tend to think it is helpful to suppress what they really think and feel and try to unilaterally master the external world through that model. And what Chris Argyris, Bill Torbert, and Don Shin found was that there was a pathway to flip that mystery mastery to collaborative inquiry and cause conversations to arise in which people could detect and correct their errors of thinking or their actions. In my work with the with good judgment approach to debriefing, to feedback conversations, and now to micro leadership, what I tried to do was bring in some of the psychological benefits of psychological safety and empathy. And how do we get ourselves set to hold positive regard about each other? How do we get ourselves set to assume the best of each other? How do we get ourselves set to hold generous inferences? Because my personal experience and what I read in the literature is if we can't down regulate our righteous indignation, if we can't get ourselves to a place where we are calm, curious, compassionate, it's really hard for us to be motivated to hear what the other person is saying. And it is really hard to convey with our faces and our nonverbals that we are actually interested. This set of research around professional conversations from the work of Chris Argyris, Bill Torbett, and Don Sharon over many decades, and our work at the Center for Medical Simulation with the transformational impact of a with good judgment approach in changing learning cultures in healthcare via debriefing is what goes behind these moments of point of care conversation or these moments in a meeting when there's conflict. So, what Laura Rock and I did, for example, over the last 4 years is bring back from the debriefing world back into the world that those management theorists and researchers were interested in, back into the real world of moment by moment conflict resolution and negotiation. I'd like to talk about one other root of this approach, which is the foundational and transformational work of the Harvard negotiation project that came out of Harvard Law School. Many of you may have heard of the famous book Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher. And Roger Fisher's very famous quip is if you want to change someone's mind, you got to know what's in it. So the work of his students, Sheila Heen, Doug Stone, and Bruce Patton, was brought forth in their beautiful book, Difficult Conversations, where they talk about ways to get genuinely curious in the moment, even if your identity is triggered, your feelings are triggered, and you disagree about the facts of what's going on, that getting to a place where I can reset, find out your story, share my story, and find a way to blend those is the pathway to collaboration across difference. So it's these moments of moving from certainty to curiosity, from I'm right to and you're wrong to let's see what we both think here. What are our mutual contributions to this situation that become part of this engine of how individual conversations can drive culture? How does each of us then apply this in our meetings, our point of care conversations, our project planning, our moments where we're deciding on criteria for a new hire? So, how we're going to do that is this week's workout of the week. And that's going to revolve around expressing your interest in collaborating together, sharing your point of view on whatever it is you need to collaborate on, inviting the other person to share that with you. So that might sound something like, could we take a minute to see if we can get on the same page? I think X is really important in this situation, but I realize you might see it differently. What's your take? Or what are you seeing? So, just to put a little more meat on the bone of that suggestion, recall the first conversation we heard in this episode sounded like this.
Oh, hey, Alyssa. I want to start setting up for the HD line so we can start CRT.
Here we go again.
What was that?
Nothing. That's just really the plan for this patient.
Yeah, I mean, we have to take a lot of fluid off. Nephrology's on board. Yeah, that's the plan. We need to do it fast.
All right, I just feel like a goals of care meeting would be more beneficial. It's futile.
You know what? We promised we would do everything, and for now, we have this plan.
All right. Another poor patient. You guys aren't the ones in the room for 12 hours watching him suffer.
And if the person had been able to do our workout of the week and tune themselves up a little bit, it might have sounded like this.
Oh, hey, Alyssa. I'd like to start getting set up for the HD line so we can start CRT, okay?
Here we go again.
Hey, can I check in with you about this plan? I'd like us to get on the same page. I can see that you're not super psyched about starting HD. So here's my thinking. He has bad CHF and sepsis, and I think with antibiotics and CRT, we can get some fluid off and see if we can get him through this. What are your concerns?
I mean, I agree. He is really sick. I hate to give false hope. I don't want to see anyone go through that.
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for speaking up. And I know it's hard to be the one in the room doing the work. We promised we'd try to get him to his daughter's graduation, and I think it's reasonable to try. So,
Well, thanks for acknowledging that it is difficult. I do think it's reasonable to try.
all right. We'll try for a few days, and if we don't see any progress, we might revisit the goals of care.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
So I'm really glad you chose to spend some time with us thinking about and practicing how do we change culture at point of care. I'm going to be very curious to hear how your journey is with trying this out.